Hello and welcome. This is Lagos Parliament. We thank you for joining us. We begin this week's episode with the passage of the year 2020 Appropriation Amendment Bill into law by lawmakers in the Lagos State House of Assembly. The passage of the bill came shortly after the report of a joint committee on economic planning, budget and finance was taken by the House.
I wish to lay the report of the Committee on Economic Plan, the Joint Committee on Economic Planning and Budget.
According to the chairman of the Lagos State House of Assembly Committee on Economic Planning and Budget, Bolaho Ishao, the approval of the reordering of priorities for the 2020 budget contained 120 findings and 120 amendments as recommended by the joint committees. The approval of the bill was necessitated by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has adversely affected the internally generated revenue projections of the state. The breakdown of the reordering indicates that the total budget size reduced by 248.093 billion naira, which is 21% reduction from the total of 1.168 trillion naira to 920.469 billion naira. The Speaker noted that this made the revised total budget of 920.469 billion naira with a recurrent expenditure of 411.608 billion naira and capital expenditure of 508.861 billion naira for the year 2020.
For reordering of priorities under the year 2020 appropriation due to unforeseen pandemic COVID-19, which has brought both developed and developing nations under a complete lockdown and also crippled the economic activities on a global scale. More so, Mr. Governor added in his letter that the pandemic, with its resultant health and economic impact, has greatly affected the context of operation and execution of the developmental agenda of his administration. Subsequently, the second reading of the bill took place at the plenary session of Monday, 29th June 2020, and the same committed to the Joint Committee on Economic Planning and Budget and Finance for further legislative deliberations. Objectives of the reordering. The objectives of the reordering are to address the current demands and necessities such as 1. Response to the effect of COVID-19 pandemic on the state economy, and 2. Need to adjust the budget size to be in sync with the economic realities resulting from the pandemic. Brief on first quarter year 2020 budget. The budget performance in the state, according to Mr. Governor's letter, was 56% as at 31st March 2020, with the breakdown as follows. Total ordinary revenue, 106%. Total recurrent expenditure, 80%. Total capital expenditure, 41%. Findings. In the course of its consideration, the committee observed the following: that the total revenue was reduced by 24% from 1,071.029 billion, which is the year 2020 approved budget, to 812.465 billion, with the Lagos Internal Revenue Service revenue projection dropping to 350 billion naira.
The government, in its wisdom, announced that all those loan beneficiaries of Lagos State government were given moratorium period, at least during this lockdown period, that they should not pay interest on their loans and they should not pay the money on the fund granted them. So I feel now bringing additional 9% to the burden of the state government, I feel the Lagos State government needs to work on this with the commercial, especially the internal loans that we we get from the commercial banks. Then secondly, sir, I want to, in my own opinion, while they were locked down, there is economic meltdown, there's a problem. Why introducing new projects? Why the ongoing projects that were being included in the budget were stepped down? I feel the budget, the project that were included in the bonds for the last 100 billion, the final part of the 100 billion bonds that were dropped and introduced new ones. I feel they should consider those projects were supposed to serve and carry them along rather than dropping the old projects that were supposed to be completed for the benefit of the larger society and introducing new ones. I feel we should allow it to reflect that the new ones should stay, while the old ones that are ongoing should be completed so that the people can enjoy dividends of democracy. Mr. Speaker, let me stop here first.
We took the presentation of reports on Appropriation Amendment Bill 2020 by the Chairman, House Committee on Economic Planning and Budgets. After the report, members fielded few questions from the Chairman, and the questions were answered. The recommendations of the committee were adopted as the resolution of the House, and the sectorial consideration of the schedule attached to the bill was also taken and approved at the Committee of Supply. Mr. Speaker, that's what transpired at the committee.
To amend the Appropriation Law 2020 and to authorize the reordering of 413,406,930,630 naira from the Consolidated Revenue Fund for recurrent expenditure and 507,658,707 naira from the Development Fund for capital expenditure, thereby making the revised year 2020 budget to be 920,468,589,337 naira for the year ending 31st December 2020 be read a third time. I so move.
The reordering of 413,406,930,630 naira from the Consolidated Revenue Fund for recurrent expenditure, 507,061,658,707 naira from Development Fund for capital expenditure, thereby making the revised year 2020 budget to be 920,468,589,337 naira for year ending 31st December 2020. Those in favor say ayes. Those against nay, the ayes have it.
The Speaker directed the Clerk of the House to forward a clean copy of the approved 2020 Appropriation Amendment Bill to Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu for his assent. The Lagos State House of Assembly has urged Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu to investigate the recent protests by street sweepers engaged by Lagos Waste Management Authority, LOMA, over non-payment of their salaries. Deliberations on the floor of the House was specifically focused on a video of the street sweepers that went viral on the social media, with the street sweepers removing their uniforms and dumping them on the floor, which formed a huge pile. That was the viral video that caught the attention of members of the Lagos State House of Assembly. Some aggrieved street sweepers employed by the Lagos Waste Management Authority, LOMA, were out on the streets protesting non-payment of their salary arrears on the 23rd of June. They were also reported to have gone on the social media to register their displeasure. Chairman of the House Committee on the Environment wants investigations to be conducted on the matter. The lawmakers also want perpetrators of the acts to be brought to book.
Over the last few weeks, we've been seeing a lot of videos on social media where people call out the state government. We state here that it's highly condemnable, reason being that LOMA as an agency does not deal directly with sweepers. They deal with contractors. Now, those contractors are paid so that they can use the resources they get after paying the sweepers to take care of the tools, the clothing they wear and other things, and also to stand as a gap between government and the sweepers. I must say, Mr. Speaker, that prior to COVID-19, we had everything going smoothly. We expected that when the shocker of COVID-19 came and there was a lockdown, Lagos State suffered a lot from the IGR, from no IGR coming in. The onus was on the contractors to be able to have palliative measures to sort the situation out and to have some form of control over their sweepers, but this wasn't done.
After investigations done, they realized that it wasn't even LOMA that was owing them. Mr. Speaker, this House, you would understand that how the LOMA works is very simple. The LOMA employs CEOs, gives them contracts, they give them the staff. They have different categories of engagement, where you have those that are engaged with 16, 18, or 30 staff. But what LOMA did was they found out that there was not enough staffs on the roads that were supposed to be working at the time. Considering the fact that we had the COVID lockdown and there was increase in waste materials from houses. So they decided to do the audit. During the audit, they found out that some CEOs did not have up to the numbers of staff that they were given and they were supposed to be paid for. And because they weren't doing that, during the process, they had to do investigations, and after investigations, they sanctioned them. Now, this particular CEO now took it upon himself or herself and went to the media to blackmail the government, saying the government has not paid salary. Where you were found wanting to have been cheating the government laid a ban on payment for you, pending the time that they find out all investigations and weren't paid. Instead of them to come to their prestigious House of Assembly or to go to relevant authorities to make complaints, they went to the media. Mr. Speaker, it is a very bad idea. Mr. Speaker, we all know health is wealth.
We cannot ignore the viral video that a lot of us, if not all of us, saw. And in my opinion, it's blackmail orchestrated to armstrong government. Like one of my colleagues mentioned, two of them actually, the process of audit was embarked upon. Some people, like they said, were not paying appropriate amounts. Also, some people were using less number of staff vis-a-vis a route. Maybe a route is supposed to have 10, 20 people, for instance. They engage 5 persons to clean the roads. Of course, 5 people cannot do the job of 20 persons. So some parts of the roads were still dirty. So if government wanted to find out what was happening, and there's nothing wrong with that. But also we would want to I want to support the first leg of this resolve, or second leg of this resolve, that the money should be paid, because these persons, they are like our frontliners. Throughout the pandemic, they were out there, they were working. If anybody did anything wrong, it is the contractor that engaged them that did something wrong. So they should be paid. We want to make that appeal, so I love that second leg of the resolve. And also, the third leg of the resolve, that this should be investigated. I think I would like to support that wholeheartedly as well, so that we can unravel what really went down in that sector. Thank you very much.
Indiscriminate dumping of refuse into the drains by residents of Lagos also formed part of the deliberations.
Perhaps the largest issue that we're having
in our state at the moment is the level of plastic waste that's floating around and blocking our gutters. So even as they're sweeping and cleaning our streets, we have issues in which local government roads are being cleaned and taken care of by the local government, and they are doing it in such a way that the roads are still being flooded. I believe we also need to investigate why these issues are happening and what the committee can do as well in terms of curbing these issues with the state government. The plastic waste that we have floating around can currently be monetized.
Mr. Speaker, as a member of the Committee on Environment, I feel the need to also lend my voice to this motion. As rightly mentioned by my chairman, provision was adequately made, and I feel a few of my members have also mentioned that. Not to emphasize on most of what the other members have said, which I totally agree with. I find it rather appalling that most of the CEOs of these companies are underpaying their staff. We shouldn't be so. I agree, however, that we should look holistically into the affairs of Loma, vis-a-vis the contractors, to correct some of the assertions made on behalf of the government.
The another arms of government that's supposed to support the state government, that is the local government, they have not done anything. The nonchalant attitude of the local government is another thing entirely. But the primary assignment of the local government is to look at the head, at the local level.
For me, I think it's an area that we just have to address properly. And failing to do this, we encourage other that works with the state to continue to embarrass the state government and, abuse privilege and opportunities being given to them.
While condemning the acts displayed by the street sweepers, the lawmakers want the Committee on the Environment to investigate the immediate and remote causes of these irregularities by Loma, with a view to finding lasting solution to the crisis. Lawmakers in the Lagos State House of Assembly recently deliberated on a motion targeted at removing all vestiges of slave trade and colonial superiority in Lagos as a stand against racism. Here's the report.
Right Honorable Mudashiru Obasai, Speaker, Lagos State of Assembly.
On Tuesday, the 30th of June, the lawmakers deliberated on a motion targeted at removing all vestiges of slave trade and colonial superiority in Lagos as a stand against racism.
We want to support this motion. I think it's a good motion, and it's a good start to what we have in mind, and that bugs every black man on this earth. Yes, it might not go the full hog, but it's a step in the right direction. It can grow to become movies, it can grow to become streets, it can grow to become many other things. But the key thing is our psyche needs to change. Yes, we cannot change history. But remember, history is to encourage us, not to demean us, not to discourage us, not to make us feel less than we are. Any history that is written that portrays you as a slave, that you are lower to another being created by God, is bad history. That history needs to be retold. The narratives must change. Those that perpetrated this, their names should be erased from history if possible.
We cannot forget our history. If we go to my honorable deputy because leader referred to Vlekete in Badagry. Vlekete is a demonstration of what happened to us. It's not a sign. We cannot wipe out history. We cannot tell our people that this thing never happened. Of course it did, and we are not promoting slavery, but at the same time we need to remind our people. So I don't want to support the issue of completely removing all the vestiges, but those things that makes our people humiliate our people in the upper part of the world, that will not allow the Western world to give us our dues in society. We need to look into that among ourselves and find a way to have a better government to value the life of our people. Then we can actually tell the other world that here This is how we are treating our countrymen.
It was a time to draw attention to streets, gardens and other notable areas named after colonial masters or beneficiaries of slave trade. The mover of the motion, Nohim Adams, made reference to the recent murder of George Floyd by white police officer Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis, the United States. He says such evil act is drawing attention to the realities of anti-black violence and racism despite abolition of slave trade in 1807.
The gruesome killing on Monday, 25th May 2020 at Minneapolis, Minnesota, United States of America, of a black man, George Floyd, 46-year-old, by a white police officer named Derek Chauvin, who suffocated him to death by kneeling on his neck for nearly 9 minutes, despite his plea of "I can't breathe." This house further notes that this brutal and callous murder of Floyd triggered worldwide condemnations, demonstrations and protests against the continuous police violence and racism of black in US and across Europe without provocation. This house is aware that these protests further drew attention to the reality of systematic racism, oppression and domination of blacks by whites in spite of abolition of vexatious slave trade and related activities since the 18th century. This house is further aware that the demonstration brought about the pulling down of statues of Edward Colston, notable slave trader, into a river in Bristol, London, while the British authorities removed from our museum statues of another prominent slave master and promised a review of history pertaining to slave trade, monuments and sites. This house is aware of the enactment of the listed site preservation law, Cap L 86 Volume 1, Laws of Lagos 2015, aimed at preservation, protection and restoration of historical properties in the state. And this house observes the need to review aspects of the law relating to the slave trade in order to correct erroneous impression of colonial masters' superiority on their ascension. This house resolves to call on Mr. Obajide Olushola Sanwo-Olu, Governor of Lagos State, to direct the Commissioner for Tourism, Art and Culture to liaise with the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice to look at the listed site preservation law 2015 with a view to removing all vestiges of slave trade and colonialism superiority.
Lawmakers' requests are clear. They want President Muhammadu Buhari to issue an executive order for the change of all streets, gardens and notable locations named after beneficiaries of slave trade across the country. They also called on the Governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, to direct the State Commissioner for Tourism, Arts and Culture and that of Justice to take a look at the listed site preservation law of 2015 with a view to removing all vestiges of slave trade as their own way of standing against racism in the country.
Our own heritage and culture, then our history will be told, and the world will equally respect our heritage. On that premise, sir, it is not only George Floyd that was killed. Immediately after the demise of George Floyd and the protesters started, I can say on authority that Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia was equally murdered in that manner. And the same goes to Breonna Taylor in Kentucky. It was also murdered in that direction. Most of the artifacts of Africans were taken down to their country. And I can remember when I went to Vienna and I was asked to come and check some of the artifacts in their museum. I was surprised. Some artifacts from some lyrics from Oyo State, some from Badagry. They only came to loot. They came to humanize us. And what we are now saying is not just, we cannot forget our history.
we should not shy away from our history. We should try and maintain all our monumental structures so for the generation yet unborn to meet things on ground. However, because if we tap into it very well, it can also serve as a source of income in terms of tourism to other people coming in. However, sir, I would also want to support Honorable Desmond Elliott by looking at the names, street names of the existing street names we have, where we have the McPherson, Liverpool, Coal Creek, and what have you. If they have no value added to the area or whatever, we can rename such streets and roads to our own prominent people that have contributed positively one way or the other.
The history has been documented and it cannot be changed. But it is for us now to look at the history, as rightly observed by Honorable Lumo, to look at the history. What we have in our books, are they true? Look at River Niger. We were told when we were in primary school, River Niger was discovered by Mungo Park and brothers. Is that the fact? Are they saying nobody was existing along that river before their arrival? So we have to change all these things. We can't say that is a name, our country name has been observed by Professor Oyebode. Our country has been named Nigeria by who? A foreigner, a colonial master. So these are the things we have to address. These are the things we have to look. And looking, you see, supremacy is all about your own mind. What you want to believe. If you want to believe Mr. A is superior than you, then it is your own mind. White or black, it doesn't matter. But it is what you believe. It is your own, your own mind that says what you are. We don't have to accept that I'm not on the same pedestal with those who have different colors from mine. It's about what you can achieve. It's about what you can do on your own. And it starts from displaying, exhibiting your own belief, your own culture. Every time you want to think where it's your thinking line about. You think Western world, you think like an American, you think like a foreigner. That is where it starts from. It's so bad, even some of our children cannot even speak our mother tongue. That is a part of the problem. So we must learn to correct all this by changing all this orientation.
And with that, we've come to the end of the program this week. We thank you for watching. Do join us again next time for another episode. Until then, please obey the public health guidelines and stay safe.